Zainab Bello had learned how to function on exhaustion. Morning belonged to the small roadside restaurant where grease clung to her clothes no matter how hard she scrubbed. Afternoons disappeared inside a crowded laundry shop, heat pressing against her skin as machines roared without mercy. And at night, she cleaned offices that glittered with money she would never touch. 3 jobs, 1 purpose: keep Malik safe. She moved quickly through the city, shoulders tight, eyes alert, the quiet posture of a woman who understood that survival favored the careful. Across the city, Lee Hyun-woo believed in something very different: control. From the private surveillance floor of his glass tower, the man known in whispers as the most disciplined king in Seoul watched the city like a strategist studying a battlefield. At 38, Hyun-woo had eliminated every weakness that could be used against him. No attachments, no distractions, no past that could return, until one camera feed froze. His fingers stilled against the console. On the screen, a woman stepped into view. Tired, alert, protective. And beside her, a small boy gripping her hand. Hyun-woo's expression didn't change, but the air in the room shifted. Because the child didn't just look familiar. The boy had his eyes. For the first time in years, Lee Hyun-woo stopped thinking like a king and started watching like a father. The alarm rang at 4:15 a.m., sharp and unforgiving. Zainab Bello was already awake. For a moment, she lay still on the thin mattress, eyes fixed on the cracked ceiling above her. Her body ached in that deep, familiar way, the kind that never really left anymore. But rest was a luxury she had stopped expecting a long time ago. Beside her, Malik slept peacefully, one small arm thrown over his pillow, his breathing soft and even. Zainab's chest tightened. That was why she got up every morning. Quietly, carefully, she slipped out of bed. The room was small, barely enough for the 2 of them, but it was clean. Worse. She moved through the motions she had perfected over the years. Boiling water, packing Malik's small lunch, checking the lock on the door twice. Always twice. By 5 a.m., she was already walking down the dim street toward the restaurant, the early morning air cool against her skin. Most people were still asleep. Zainab had already lived half a day. The restaurant shift passed in a blur of clattering plates and forced smiles. She moved quickly, efficiently, never lingering, never inviting conversation. The less people noticed you, the safer you stayed. That was another rule life had taught her. By afternoon, she was at the laundry shop, hands deep in soapy water, shoulders burning. Customers came and went. Zainab kept her head down. But even here, she watched. Every door that opened. Every stranger who lingered too long. Every unfamiliar car outside. Motherhood had sharpened something inside her. A quiet, constant alertness that never fully powered down. Because the world had already proven once that safety could disappear overnight. When her second shift finally ended, the sky was already darkening. Exhaustion pressed heavily against her bones as she made her way to pick up Malik. The moment he saw her, his face lit up. "Mama!" He ran into her arms with full force, small fingers gripping her shirt like she might vanish if he let go. And just like that, the weight of the day cracked. Zainab knelt and held him tightly, pressing her cheek against his soft hair. For a brief second, her eyes closed. Still here. Still safe. Still hers. "Did you eat your lunch?" she asked gently. Malik nodded seriously. "Yes, Mama." She smiled, small, tired, but real. As they walked home hand in hand, Zainab didn't notice the black car parked quietly across the street. Didn't see the tinted window lower just slightly. Didn't feel the shift already beginning to move toward her carefully guarded world. All she knew was that tomorrow she would wake up and do it all again. Because survival didn't pause. And neither did she. The city looked different from the top floor of Lee Hyun-woo's headquarters. Cleaner, smaller, contained. From behind the floor-to-ceiling glass, the noise of the streets below could not reach him. That was the way he preferred it. Distance created clarity. Distance created control. Hyun-woo stood motionless, hands resting lightly behind his back. his expression carved into its usual calm. To most people, the room itself was intimidating. Dark marble floors, low strategic lighting, silent men positioned at careful distances. But to him it was simply order. On the massive screen wall behind him, the city moved in fragments. Traffic feeds, security grids, financial streams. Every piece of information flowed exactly where he wanted it. Nothing surprised Lee Hyun-woo, because years ago he had learned the most important rule of survival. Trust no one. Not partners. Not allies. And certainly not emotions. A soft knock came at the door before it opened precisely 2 seconds later. "Director Lee," his right-hand man said carefully, stepping inside. "The Busan shipment has been secured. No interference." Hyun-woo gave a single slow nod. "Good." His voice was quiet, but it carried the kind of authority that never needed to rise. The man hesitated. Just briefly. Hyun-woo noticed. He always noticed. "Something else?" Hyun-woo asked without turning. "There is a minor irregularity in the city surveillance rotation," the man admitted. "It's already being reviewed." For most men it would have meant nothing. For Hyun-woo, nothing was ever minor. His eyes shifted slightly toward the glowing wall of screens. "Flag it," he said calmly. "I want full visibility." "Yes, Director." The man left quickly, the door closing with a soft click behind him. Silence returned. Hyun-woo finally moved, stepping forward with slow, measured precision. His gaze swept across the surveillance feeds, detached, analytical, untouched by the human stories unfolding inside each frame. People lived, people struggled, people made emotional mistakes. And emotions created leverage. It was why he had cut every unnecessary tie years ago. Why he had built his empire on discipline instead of sentiment. Feel nothing. Lose nothing. His fingers moved once across the glass console, pulling up another rotating city feed. For a brief second, his reflection stared back at him in the dark screen. Composed, controlled, untouchable. Exactly as it should be. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, Lee Hyun-woo watched everything. And trusted no one. Not yet knowing that somewhere in that endless grid of moving lives, a small boy with familiar eyes had already begun to rewrite the one rule he had never broken. The irregularity appeared again at 21:47. Hyun-woo did not react immediately. He simply watched. The surveillance wall shifted in silent sequence. Traffic cams, storefront feeds, pedestrian sweeps, until the flagged frame settled at the center of the screen. A narrow street. Dim lighting. Foot traffic thinning with the night. And there, the woman. He recognized her at once from the earlier freeze in the system rotation. Zainab Bello, according to the preliminary tag his analysts had attached. Average income bracket. Multiple employments. No criminal flags. Ordinary. Except for the child beside her. Hyun-woo's gaze sharpened almost imperceptibly. The boy walked close to the woman's side. Small fingers curled into her hand with quiet trust. He couldn't have been more than 5. Nothing unusual. Nothing remarkable. And yet, Hyun-woo stepped closer to the screen. "Zoom," he said quietly. The image sharpened. The boy turned his head slightly, distracted by something outside the camera frame. That was when Hyun-woo's fingers stilled against the console. Because he saw it clearly now. Eyes. Dark. Steady. Unusually focused for a child that age. Eyes that looked back at the world with the same calm intensity he had spent years training into himself. The room felt quieter. Behind him, one of his analysts shifted nervously. "Director Lee." Hyun-woo didn't answer right away. His mind was already moving. Fast, precise, ruthless in its logic. Coincidences existed. But patterns mattered more. "Pull full background on the child," he said at last, voice smooth and controlled. "Yes, Director." "Name." Hyun-woo's gaze remained locked on the screen. "Malik Bello." The analyst's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling public records, school registrations, medical filings. Information began stacking rapidly along the side panels. Born locally. No listed father. Single-parent household. Hyun-woo's expression did not change. But something cold and unfamiliar had begun to stir beneath the surface of his composure. Cross-reference birth timeline, he added quietly. The analyst hesitated, just slightly, but obeyed. Seconds ticked by. Director, the dates. Hyun-woo's eyes narrowed. Say it. The analyst swallowed. They align with your last documented presence in Lagos 5 years ago. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Precise. Hyun-woo finally leaned back slightly, studying the boy's frozen image with new intensity. Not emotion. Never emotion. Just calculation. But for the first time in years, the equation in front of him refused to stay simple. Begin DNA confirmation protocol, he said calmly. The analyst froze. Director, are you certain? Hyun-woo's gaze flicked toward him. Sharp enough to cut. The room temperature seemed to drop instantly. Do it, he said softly. No one spoke after that. As the screens continued to glow in the darkened room, Lee Hyun-woo stood perfectly still, watching the small boy who walked beside Zainab Bello. Watching the face that shouldn't match. And already preparing for the possibility that it did. The results arrived at 2:13 a.m. Hyun-woo had not left his office. The city outside had long since gone quiet, lights thinning across the skyline, but inside the surveillance room, nothing had slowed. Screens still glowed. Data still flowed. And Lee Hyun-woo still stood exactly where he had been, waiting. A soft chime broke the silence. The analyst's voice came carefully through the intercom. Director. The DNA comparison is complete. Hyun-woo did not move. Send it. A new file opened across the main screen. Clean. Clinical. Precise. For a moment, his eyes scanned the report the way he approached every problem in his empire. Detached, methodical, expecting clarity. Probability of paternity. 99.98%. The room seemed to still. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Just different. Hyun-woo's fingers rested lightly against the glass console, but the usual effortless control in his posture had shifted. Barely visible, but there. Crack. Dangerous. Behind him no one spoke. Because no one had ever seen Lee Hyun-woo hesitate. His gaze moved slowly back to the frozen image of the boy on the surveillance feed. Malik Bello. His son. The word did not settle easily. 4 years, Hyun-woo had built his world on careful eliminations. Weak links removed, emotional variables neutralized, past attachments buried so deeply they could never be used against him. It had worked. Till now. The boy on the screen shifted slightly in the captured frame. His small hand still wrapped securely in Zainab Bello's. Protective. Trusting. And aware. Something unfamiliar pressed quietly against Hyun-woo's chest. Not weakness. Not fear. Something far more inconvenient. Responsibility. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Memory tried to surface. Lagos years ago, a night he had long since filed away under strategic irrelevance. A woman with guarded eyes and quiet strength. Zainab. He had walked away then. Deliberately. Cleanly. Because distance protected everyone. That had always been the rule. Hyun-woo straightened slowly, the brief fracture in his composure sealing back into place with practiced precision. When he spoke, his voice had returned to its usual calm. Status of external exposure risk. The analyst cleared his throat quickly. None detected, Director. The child's records are clean. No external flags. But not safe. Never safe. Hyun-woo's gaze returned once more to Malik's face, to the unmistakable reflection of his own eyes staring back through the screen. For the first time in years, the equation had changed. And Lee Hyun-woo understood something with cold, absolute clarity. This was no longer just surveillance. This was no longer just strategy. It was personal. His fingers moved once across the console. Initiate discreet protective watch, he ordered quietly. Tier 1. No visibility. Oz. Yes, director. The room returned to silence as the command went live. High above the sleeping city, Lee Hyun-woo stood motionless, eyes fixed on the small boy who had just rewritten the rules of his carefully controlled world. Because numbers didn't lie. And neither did blood. By morning, the city moved exactly as it always did. Crowded buses, open market stalls, workers rushing past one another with the quiet urgency of survival. Nothing looked different. That was the point. From the back seat of an unmarked black sedan, Hyun-woo watched the live feed without expression. The tablet in his hand displayed a rotating grid, street angles, pedestrian tracking, soft facial locks that updated in real time. At the center of it all, Zainab Bello and her son. Positions, he asked quietly. His security chief's voice came through the encrypted line. Tier 1 perimeter established. 2 mobilize, 1 static. No close contact. Invisible. Hyun-woo's gaze remained steady as the morning footage showed Zainab walking quickly down the familiar street, Malik's small hand tucked securely in hers. She moved like someone used to carrying weight alone. Alert. Careful. Tired. He noticed the way her eyes scanned reflections in shop windows. The slight adjustment in her pace when unfamiliar figures passed too close. The double check of the apartment lock the night before had not been accidental. Zainab Bello was not careless. Interesting. Maintain distance, Hyun-woo said. No pattern repetition. Yes, director. Across the city, the quiet machinery of his protection began to settle into place. A delivery rider who lingered half a block too long. A parked car that rotated positions every few hours. A street vendor who wasn't really selling anything. To anyone else, the street looked the same. But now, it breathed under his control. On the screen, Malik suddenly laughed at something his mother said. Bright, unguarded, completely unaware of the invisible net tightening gently around his world. Hyun-woo's fingers paused briefly against the tablet. Children were unpredictable variables. Another reason he had avoided attachments. And yet, his gaze lingered half a second longer than necessary before he shifted focus. School route confirmed, he asked. Confirmed. Low-risk zone, but we've expanded coverage 2 blocks out. Efficient. Quiet. Exactly how he preferred it. Still, something in his chest remained unsettled. Because protection from a distance had always been simple when the subject was expendable. This was different. On the screen, Zainab suddenly slowed near the corner of her street. Her head turned slightly, eyes narrowing just a fraction as she scanned the road behind her. Hyun-woo's posture sharpened. Report. Possible environmental awareness, the security chief said quickly. But no direct detection. Zainab stood still for 2 seconds. Then she adjusted Malik's backpack and continued walking. But the message was clear. She felt something. Not the watchers. Not the net. But the shift. Hyun-woo leaned back slowly, expression returning to its usual calm mask. Reduce visible rotation by 10%, he ordered quietly. She's observant. Yes, director. The line clicked off. For a long moment, Hyun-woo remained still, watching the live feed as mother and son disappeared into the morning crowd. Protection was in place. The perimeter was secure. Everything was under control. And yet, for the first time in years, Lee Hyun-woo understood a simple, inconvenient truth. The closer he watched them, the harder it was going to be to stay in the shadows. By the 3rd day, the feeling hadn't gone away. Zainab tried to ignore it. She had learned long ago that fear could become a habit if you fed it too often. So she moved through her routine the same way she always did. Head down, steps steady, mind focused on the next task in front of her. But the air around her felt off. Started small. A motorbike that appeared twice on her morning route. A street vendor who packed up the moment she walked past. A car parked near the apartment building that didn't quite seem to belong. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they pressed quietly against her instincts. And Zainab Bello trusted her instincts. That afternoon at the laundry shop, her hands moved automatically through the soapy water while her eyes flicked toward the glass door every few minutes. Customers came and went, the bell chiming softly each time. Still, the tightness in her chest remained. When her shift finally ended, the sky was already turning gold with early evening light. She picked up Malik from the neighbor's apartment, forcing a small smile the moment he ran into her arms. "Mama, look," he said proudly, holding up a crumpled drawing. Zainab crouched down, studying the uneven stick figures and bright scribbles. Her heart softened despite the unease coiling low in her stomach. "It's beautiful," she said gently. Malik beamed. They started the walk home together, his small hand warm in hers. Halfway down the street, Zainab slowed. Just slightly. Her eyes moved casually across the road, then to the reflection in a dark shop window. Nothing obvious, nothing she could point to, but the feeling sharpened, like being watched from very far away. Her grip on Malik's hand tightened before she forced herself to relax. "Don't panic. Not unless you're sure." She kept walking, posture loose, pace unchanged. Years of survival had taught her that fear was safest when it stayed hidden. Behind her calm expression, though, her mind was already working. Exits. Neighbors she could trust if something went wrong. By the time they reached their apartment building, her senses were stretched thin and alert. Inside, she locked the door. Once, then twice. Malik wandered toward the small table, humming softly to himself as he spread out his drawing again. Zainab stood still in the middle of the room, listening. The building was quiet. The street outside sounded normal. Everything looked exactly the same. And yet, her eyes slowly lifted toward the curtained window. Somewhere deep in her chest, the warning remained. Persistent. And finish. Zainab Bello didn't know who was watching. She didn't know why. But one thing had already become clear. Something was moving toward her carefully built world. And whatever it was, it hadn't shown its face yet. The first ripple appeared where it always did. In the shadows between empires. Across the city, far from the quiet street Zainab Bello called home, a different kind of surveillance was already in motion. Not protective. Not careful. Predatory. Inside a private lounge washed in low amber light, a man leaned back slowly in his chair, eyes narrowed at the tablet in his hand. "Run that again," he said. The footage replayed. Traffic grids. Rotating street feeds. Nothing unusual to an untrained eye. But to men who survived by studying power shifts, patterns told stories. And Lee Hyun-woo's patterns had changed. "He expanded coverage in 3 civilian zones this week," one of the men nearby muttered. Quietly. The man in the chair tapped the screen once, thoughtful. "Hyun-woo doesn't move resources without reason." Silence settled heavily across the room, because everyone there understood the same rule. When a king moved pieces this carefully, it meant something valuable was on the board. "Find the focus point," the man ordered calmly. "I want to know what he's protecting." Across the city, invisible lines began to shift. High above the skyline, Hyun-woo stood in front of the surveillance wall, his expression as controlled as ever. But the alert flashing quietly in the corner of the screen did not escape him. External probe detected. Careful. Professional. His gaze hardened slightly. "So," he murmured under his breath. They were paying attention. Behind him, his security chief spoke quickly. "Director, we're detecting low-level traffic analysis from an outside network." Source still masked. Hyun-woo didn't look surprised. Predators always noticed when another predator changed its hunting pattern. "Countermeasures," he said smoothly. "Layer 2. "Yes, Director." The system shifted instantly. False rotations, data noise, clean digital misdirection. To most observers, it would look like nothing more than routine city fluctuation. But Hyun-woo knew better. The window had opened. And once rivals started looking, they rarely stopped. His eyes moved back to the live feed of Zainab and Malik Street. The evening crowd flowed normally, unaware of the quiet storm beginning to gather above them. Too soon. The thought was cold and precise. He had planned for time, for distance, for control. Now the board was accelerating. Expand Malik Bello's risk classification, Hyun-woo ordered quietly. Was. Director, to what level? His gaze remained fixed on the screen. Protected priority. The room went still, because that designation was rarely used. And never lightly. Yes, Director. Across the city, the invisible net tightened another degree. But somewhere in the dark, rival eyes were already narrowing. Watching. Calculating. Waiting. And for the first time since Malik Bello had unknowingly stepped into his orbit, Lee Hyun-woo understood the simple, dangerous truth. The game was no longer contained. Everyone was starting to look. The knock came just after sunset. Zainab froze. She had just finished setting Malik's small plate on the table when the sound echoed through the quiet apartment. Firm, measured, not the hesitant knock of a neighbor. Her pulse spiked instantly. Malik looked up. "Mama, I'll get it," she said softly, though her body had already gone alert. Every instinct sharpened at once. She moved toward the door slowly, silently, her eyes flicking once toward the curtained window. The hallway outside remained quiet, but the uneasy pressure in her chest had returned, stronger this time. Closer. Zainab stopped at the door and didn't open it immediately. "Who is it?" she called, voice steady. Brief pause. Lee Hyun-woo. The name meant nothing to her, but the calm weight behind it made her fingers tighten on the lock. Slowly, carefully, she opened the door, and everything in her world tilted. He stood there like he had stepped out of a different reality. Tall, composed, dressed in quiet precision that spoke of power without needing to announce it. His face was calm, but his eyes were locked on Malik. Recognition flashed sharp and cold through Zainab's body. Danger. Her arm moved instantly, pulling Malik slightly behind her without breaking eye contact. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice cool despite the sudden thunder in her chest. For a moment, Lee Hyun-woo said nothing. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. The same steady eyes, the same quiet watchfulness, the same blood. Something inside his carefully built control shifted. Not enough to show, but enough to matter. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and even. "I'm not here to cause trouble." Zainab didn't relax, didn't move, didn't trust him. "Then you should leave," she said firmly. For the first time, Hyun-woo's gaze lifted fully to her face. And something like recognition, older, buried, flickered briefly in his eyes. "Zainab Bello," he said quietly. Her stomach dropped. He knew her name. Every alarm in her body went off at once. "What do you want?" she demanded, sharper now. A long second passed. Then Lee Hyun-woo did something no one in his empire had seen him do in years. He stepped forward, not as a king, but as a man choosing risk. His voice, when it came, was still controlled, still precise, but no longer distant. "I'm not here to take him," he said. Zainab's breath caught despite herself. Hyun-woo's eyes shifted once more to Malik. Steady, protective, certain. Then back to her. "I'm here," he finished quietly. "Because he's mine to protect too." Silence exploded in the small apartment. Zainab's world tilted violently off balance. And for the first time since Lee Hyun-woo had built his empire on emotional distance, he had stepped fully into the line of fire. The city didn't notice when Lee Hyun-woo began to shift his empire. That was by design. Power, when handled correctly, moved quietly. 3 days after he stepped into Zainab Bello's apartment and rewrote the rules of his own restraint, orders began to flow through his network. Precise, controlled, irreversible. Non-essential operations were reassigned. 2 high-risk routes were permanently shut down. A front company near Zainab's neighborhood was quietly dissolved and replaced with something cleaner, quieter, less visible. His men didn't question it. They had learned long ago that when Hyun-woo moved pieces, The board was already 10 steps behind him. Still, the changes were unusual. Even his closest advisors felt it. Inside the war room, the city grid glowed across the massive screen wall as Hyunwoo stood with his hands clasped loosely behind his back. His posture was the same, calm, untouchable. But the priorities had changed. "Update," he said. His security chief stepped forward. "Perimeter around the Bello residence is now fully integrated into our low-visibility network. Civilian interference risk reduced by 40%. Hyunwoo gave a single nod. "School route. Secured and rerouted through safer coverage zones. No external probes detected in the last 24 hours. Not perfect, but better." His gaze lingered briefly on the live street feed where Zainab and Malik walked side by side, the evening light soft around them. She still moved cautiously, still scanned reflections, still kept Malik close. She didn't trust him yet. He hadn't expected her to. Trust wasn't something he inspired easily. And for the first time, he wasn't trying to force it. That, more than anything, marked the shift. Years ago, Lee Hyunwoo had built his empire on one unbreakable rule: feel nothing, need nothing, lose nothing. It had made him powerful. It had made him untouchable. It had also made him alone. His eyes rested on Malik's small figure as the boy laughed at something Zainab said, completely unaware of the invisible storm that had nearly formed around his life. Unaware of the man who had quietly moved an entire empire to close the distance between danger and his future. Hyunwoo exhaled slowly. Not regret, not weakness, something steadier, something far more dangerous. Purpose. Maintain protective priority, he said quietly. No disruptions to their routine. Yes, Director. The room fell silent again as the order locked into place. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that one of its most feared rulers had just redrawn the lines of his power. Not for territory, not for dominance, but for two people who had never asked for his protection. For the first time in his life, Lee Hyunwoo wasn't building an empire to stand alone at the top. He was building one designed to shield something fragile, something human, something his. And in the quiet glow of the surveillance wall, the ruthless king completed the one transformation he had never planned for. He finally had something to lose. And that made him more dangerous than ever.